Hello everyone, my name is Jeff Neville and welcome to Selective Imagery. Welcome to Thanks for the Memories, Part 20. Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Thanks for the Memories. Today we're going to talk about a historical significant camera called the Ansco Memo Camera, which was a wooden-bodied camera with leatherette, utilized 35 millimeter movie film that ran up and down vertically in the camera body versus horizontally, and it utilized the finest quality 35 millimeter cinema film according to Ansco. And like I said, it was a half frame camera, and I'm going to show you it here. Very, very, very small, is it not? So that's the front view, the side view, nothing on this side, top view, nice little carrying handle. And I'll tell you what this is later on. It's interesting. And it had a tripod socket on the bottom. Now this camera came out in 1926/1927, and there's a lot of different articles out there and documentation where there's a little confusion around that. But I'm going to talk about the one that I think seems to be the most accurate. Now, this was not the first American-made camera to use 35 millimeter film, but it was the first one that actually sold in quantity. Okay, it was the first Ansco camera to carry the Memo name, and eventually Ansco and AGFA joined together as one company for a while, and they continued to use the Memo name in numerous camera bodies that came out in the following decades. Now this is the base model. From what I can tell, that came out was $20. It came with a soft gray suede carrying case. For an extra whopping $3, you could get black sole leather, and it had a slot in it so that you could slide your belt through it, so you could have your case along your waist, open the case, take the camera out, put it back in the case. Now there was a wood lacquered version of this that had brass accents when it first came out, presumably for only a couple months, from December of 1926 to January of 1927, at which time the wood was covered like this with a leather covering. A few months later, they came out with what they called a shutter guard to prevent accidental shutter activation. And as you can see on this camera, this is the shutter release. There is no shutter guard on this model. So this is one of the earliest cameras that they ever made. This was in 1927. A shutter guard had basically a piece of metal that protruded from behind the lever, so you could not accidentally trip it. Obviously, that didn't work too well, because I saw cameras that were made, years later, that had like a little claw hook that would swing around, and the hook would go underneath the shutter lever, so that you couldn't pull it down even if you wanted to. You had to swing that out of the way in order to take a picture. So there were, a lot of variations for this camera. I was not able to find, other than you can go on Wikipedia and you can see a nice picture of the wooden lacquered version, which I would love to find one of those. But I'm sure, one, they're rare, and I think for you to get a hold of one of those, it would probably cost you easily over $1,000, which I'm not going to spend on it. But I wasn't able to find any that were for sale anyway. Now, the camera utilized, we'll get into the features and more information on the camera, but it utilized their own cassette for the 35 millimeter movie film, because at that time there was no standard cassette until 1934. And like I said, the film traveled vertically and was a half frame picture. So it was half the size of the 24 by 36 millimeter format that was used in the first Leica cameras when they came out a few years prior to this. And of course, the Leica, being a full frame camera, was going to have superior image quality, and also would give you the capability of making better enlargements as well, okay, than this. But this was kind of a niche camera, and we'll get into what this camera, or who this camera was being marketed to. So the story is that this particular model stopped being produced shortly after 1934, once the 35 millimeter film cartridge was standardized, and this camera disappeared. So it did not have a long run. Now, I'll show you it later on when I take the back off, but I'll just talk about it briefly here. Is the, your normal 35 millimeter camera, basically had a sprocket system to move the film and engage the perforations in the film to advance the film. This had a claw-based film advance mechanism like a cine camera would have, where you had two claws that would come down, and when you advance the film, it would pull the film down and advance it to the next image. Okay. It made 50 exposures on a roll of Ansco Memo daylight film that in a day cost 50 cents per roll. So their advertising was 50 shots for 50 cents. Also, in the ads for this camera, in terms of, like I said, who was it being marketed to, they would talk about the reason it's called the Memo is because they said it's for pictorial memoranda of everything you see. Therefore, the name Memo. Both in their advertising campaigns and in the owner's manual itself, they give you examples of why business people and professionals would want to use this camera. They cite examples like a construction superintendent who's trying to track his job and wants to take pictures and not have it cost him a lot of money. Okay, so he could take progress photos of the job being done at a very affordable cost. It was also used for, like, real estate agents would use it to, capture the images, of the houses that they were selling. It could be used by investigators. This camera was very easy to use with this viewfinder. The scope on the top made it very handy to shoot this camera from a car, aka investigators, if you know what I mean. Salesmen would use it. Basically, anybody had to document the progress of something. Okay, that's who this was catered to at a very affordable price point. Now, they do acknowledge, even in the owner's manual, that this is a secondary camera. They looked at this as a secondary camera, a niche camera, and it was never meant to compete with a full-frame 35mm camera like a Leica. Okay. So, I'm going to show you the cartridge here. This is an original... Here. This is an original AGFA. You can kind of see the writing on it. Original Ansco film cartridge. Looks like a mailbox. When you mount it in the camera, okay, you slide it in the camera this way with the film coming out the bottom. And we'll get into the whole process of loading film in the camera later on. But this is the original, and they had to load this manually, load this film in manually, and these cartridges did, were not like the standard 1934 when we finally had a standard where the film was wrapped around a spool. These weren't wrapped around a spool. Now I happen to have a cutaway of one of these that I'm going to show you. So here's the side view, and here's the crazy cutaway. Here's the here's the bottom. Here's the felt. And you had two copper springs that kept tension. As they loaded the film in, it would get coiled up. The spring would keep everything tight. So you couldn't use a roll over and over and over and over again. You had limited uses because eventually these things lost their springiness, their tension. So you had to have another cartridge. And you had to have two cartridges when you went to load the film in this camera. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But and I'll tell you the story why I have a demolished film canister as well. Now let's get into how this camera functions. So let's get on to the functioning of the camera. From the front view, you have the cutout, okay, showing the lens, which there are numerous types that we'll get into later on, which affected the price of the camera. This is the basic lens. Adjustments to aperture and the shutter speed are done with these little sliding metal protrusions that you see here. Okay, you got one at the top to changing your shutter speeds. You got one on the bottom for changing your f-stops. This lens is f6.3 wide open to f16, I believe. Yeah, and your shutter speeds go from 1/25th, 1/50th, 1/100th of a second, and then you have a bulb mode and a time mode as well. All right, and this one says Ansco on the front, so it's one of the earliest ones made. Down the road, this said Memo instead. Okay, but in the beginning, it just said Ansco. And this is a mechanical film advance. And as you take a picture with this camera, you can probably just see the movement. Okay. That's how you tell how many shots you've taken. Okay. And now, Ansco claimed that 99 out of 100 pictures could be taken at 1/25th of a second shutter speed because of the short focal length. I don't know exactly what the focal length is for this lens. I could not find that information. But because it's so short, I mean, this is not a focusing lens. Okay, you do not have to focus anything. You just set your aperture, you set your f-stop, and you take a picture. They're saying its motion stopping power was equivalent to a Model 1A camera that would be set at 1/100th of a second. They recommended that you used your first roll of film on a sunny day and set your camera at 1/25th and at f8 or f11 and just have a good time. Take some pictures with it, send it out. The counter advances with the shutter release. Okay. However, the counter does not reset. So there's a milled portion of the knob at the top. It allows you to grip it, and you actually push on with your forefinger and you rotate it so that you bring it to number 50. So 50 is the starting point when you put in a fresh roll, because then when you take your first picture, it goes to the first line, which is, okay, you've taken photo number 1. Tells you how many photos you have taken. Okay. You have a direct vision Galenine tubular spyglass on the top for composition. And then you also have this, and they say that's great if you say you're an investigator and you're taking pictures of some things, some stuff going on. Very easy to be in your car and just look through that and take what you got to take, if you know what I mean. You just want to make sure the car engine's off, because with the slow shutter speeds, you don't need any shaking going on any more than necessary. Now, I know this camera was from 1927, one of the very earliest ones made, because it does not have what they call a shutter guard. Okay, so this is definitely one of the earliest cameras. Now, the small screw here, if you take the screw out, it allows you to swap out the whole lens and shutter assembly and put in another one. That's pretty cool. There's nothing on the other side of the camera. The bottom, you have a tripod socket, and the rear is your film advance, and we will talk about that. The carrying handle is great on the top. If you were going to take a vertical picture, you could actually put your fingers under here and use that to help you steady the camera. It really does help. Okay, now there's that sliding lock I talked about, and I wish they had it top and bottom. They only have it on the top, so you slide that. Slide that out of the way, and then you can take the back off. Okay, so this is the rear. The rear inside of the camera. Now, the film that you would buy would be obviously from Ansco, and you could get it from Agfa as well. They became joined at the hip at one point in time where they were one company. But anyway, you'd get your preloaded film, and the loaded film would go in the top. So you would drop that in. I'm not going to push it in all the way. It does have like a piece of metal in here that is a little springy, that helps keep the canister in there tight. and I'm just going to hold this with my finger, but you can see here's where the film comes out. Now, to load this film in, you have to have an empty camera. Would come with one of these empty. You would order a roll of film. You put the film in the top. You take the other one, which when you load that empty canister in, is going to be orientated like that. So you'd pull the film out. Okay, you would stretch it across. You would feed it in the empty canister a couple inches. All right, and that's how, and the film would lay across here. You know, you can see your lens in there, lens opening. All right, and that's how you'd put it in. So it'd almost be like a film cartridge, but it's not all self-contained. Okay, because you have the film going across, and both of these spools are pushed into the body of the camera. So you know, when you got the original film, you'd break off. There was like a seal or sticker at the end of it, had a dotted line. You'd tear that off, and then you'd pull out the end of the film, and you'd tear off the tongue, and then you would feed it into the empty canister. And then, like I said, they'd both be pushed all the way in, and the film would be nice and flush across here. And then you would get the back, which we will now look at the back. Okay, here you go. You can see the tangs. This acts as a pressure plate. Okay, acts as a pressure plate. You got springs for when you're advancing the film. When you're advancing the film, you can see those tangs. I'm trying to position it so you can see them. Okay. And the tangs are curved, so they grab into the holes on the side of the film and pull it into that empty canister. Okay, and they're curved at the top so that when this is going back up, it doesn't tear the film. It doesn't grab it because it's curved. So look, that's what they mean by the claw. So advance the film. That's how you advance the film. And when you first put the cover back on the back, you advance it 3 times. And then after that, when you take your picture, you just advance it once. It's a little finicky to get the back on, unfortunately. At least not used to it yet, but you get the back on, and you set your aperture, you set your shutter speed, you take your picture, and then you have to go and one time down. Take a picture, advance the film, and then when you get to 50, you're done. Okay, but you know, another thing they tout, you know, there's no rewind knob, right? You're transferring the film from one canister into an empty canister. You're done. You don't have to sit there, hit a button or whatever, and then do the rewind and rewind the film, or turn the knob and rewind the film into the canister. You already advanced it into the empty canister. Then when you're done, you take that out, you send it out to get developed. Then what the canister that had the film in it now becomes the empty one. It goes on the bottom. The new roll of film goes on the top. You start all over again. Very hard to find original wooden versions of this, but you could get these 1960 versions that were called AGFA Rapid cassettes. Here's the opening in the top. Let me hold it like it would be in the. Okay. So I bought 2 of these, so I could use the camera if I felt like, you know, forcing and loading in film. There's felt in here. I could load this with some film. And I have a second one of these that would be the empty one, and I could feed the leader in and put it in the camera and actually use it if I wanted to. I don't know if I'd find anybody that could develop the film. That's the problem. But just so you know, this, I get off topic a little bit, these AGFA rapid cassettes were used on the German-made AGFA IsoFlash Rapid that was produced in the 1960s, and used a similar approach to the Memo in terms of how you loaded the film. However, it did have a gearing mechanism inside to advance the film versus the claws. Okay. And the reason they made a camera that went back to the old days in the 1960s was because they were trying to compete with the cassette system that Kodak used with their 126 film cartridges. So this was their mindset to create a cartridge type of system with 35 millimeter film. Now, the Ansco Memo cameras were produced in a lot of different configurations. You could get models with an f6.3 lens, an f3.5 lens, focusing and non-focusing lenses, of which I already said this one is a non-focusing lens. They had a few months with the uncovered leather, no leatherette, but a nice lacquered wood body. Those are expensive collectibles right now. And they even made one that had wood. It was an olive drab color. It was called the Boy Scout model. They had models that focused to 3 feet, others that focused to 2 feet. Lenses, a lot of different lens manufacturers for this camera. This one, like I said, is one of the first. This is the basic one, the Ilex, I-L-E-X. You had Wallensack, Bosch & Lomb, AGFA lenses, and other makers. Now they described 4 in their advertising when it came out. They described 4 available models that ranged from base unit $20 up to $40, depending on what lens you decided to buy. Now, the negative strips may be printed on positive motion picture film so that you could project those images on a screen by means of what they called a still film projector. This gives one the effect of a regular stereo opticon with a roll of film versus in place of a box of slides. Now, it should be noticed noted, I'll speak good in a second here, it should be noted that any pictures you take, when you're holding the camera this way, you're actually taking a picture that's left to right, horizontal, landscape mode. You want to take portrait, you're tipping the camera this way. Now you got a portrait. But if you go and you have these transferred onto a positive strip of film for the still image projector, any vertical shots of a person, they're going to look like they're laying on the ground. Okay, so you want to think about that, when you're taking your images, that obviously the normal upright position for a horizontal landscape picture is going to work very well with the projector system, whereas any portrait mode shots will not. So as I was saying, the cost to make Memo film negatives into and process them on a positive film was 3 cents per shot, and that was really, really cost effective for doing presentations, photo sharing with friends, that type of thing. Versus using the old magic lantern projectors with images that were developed on glass slides and put it in the much more expensive to do, bulky, big heavy projectors, big heavy slides. The roll of film, okay, weighing hardly an ounce, could show as many images as 30 pounds of glass slides. So, and Ansco developed a positive film printer for use by photo finishers in connection with the Memo camera. And they also made a lot of other developing equipment and enlarging equipment many years ago as well. Now this is where we're going to end the discussion on the Memo camera. I hope you enjoyed this little ride through history on this cute little box camera that has a great story to it. And I love cameras that have a story. But the plus side of this, thanks for the memories, is going to be something that was advertised at the same time of the Memo camera. And it's in this box. And no, I am not going to pull a rabbit out of the box. But in a second, I'm going to show you what kind of came out at the same time as the Memo camera. And it does tie in with it perfectly. So now we move on to what I've pulled out of this box. And it wasn't a rabbit. What I pulled out of the box was the original instruction sheet, the Ansco Memo Scope. Okay, it says 100 memo pictures with $1 worth of film. The Memo Scope was Ansco's still projector, okay, for still images. Voila. Now, obviously, I spent some work really cleaning this sucker up. Fully functional. The lamp still works. Okay. Everything still works. So this is the Ansco Memo Scope. This is the a lens that you put on the front. You projected image obviously comes out through this, and to focus you slide this in and out to focus depending on how far away you are from your screen or your wall or whatever you're focusing on. I'm going to just take this off for now for the purpose of talking about this. But this is small, it's light. I mean, what you had to use for the glass slides was much bigger, much heavier than this. You can see the Ansco. Oh, you probably can't see it. Not enough light here. But it's a plate. The plate basically says Ansco Memo Scope, AGFA Ansco Corporation, Bingham, New York, USA. Okay, so this does have the Ansco AGFA name on it. Now, let's see. So between that camera that I showed you and this projector combination, what a 1-2 punch for back in the day, okay? For a minimal amount of cost, you could have that. You could have the negatives made and get your prints. You could have the negative strip transferred onto a positive film, and you get that back, and you put the film, okay? You put the film up here, and it comes down, and we're going to lift open the gate, okay? Comes down through the gate, okay? Lay it down through the gate. You get the film engaged with the sprockets here. You lay it flat. You close the gate, lock shut. You plug it in, okay, and basically you just turn the knob to go to the next picture. Talk about what your vacation photos. Talk about pictures that you took of the construction person, showing all the phases of construction on the project on a screen to a bunch of people, and just sitting there and putting in film strips. You know, basically the precursor to slide film, when you think about it, the precursor to slide projectors. A cost savings versus having to develop movie film and buy a movie camera. Okay, really, really, really neat thing. It had has a 100-watt projector lamp. It runs on 120 volts. Here's the cord. 2-prong plug. Remember those 2-prong plugs? And excellent illumination. This was $19.50, including the case. Now, $19.50 in 1927, well, that was a lot of money. Oh, drop the. Okay. So we're going to store the. You had a little hole on this base to, when you put it away, to put the lens, and there's a lens inside here too. $19.50 in 1927. In 2024, the equivalent was $297.48. Okay. So basically, I'd say the memo camera that I purchased, I mean, it was, as I said, it was non-functional. Had to destroy the film cartridge to get it out, had to fix the shutter. But now I have a working camera, I have a working projector. If anybody knows of anyone that actually has and is willing to sacrifice for the sake of the show a strip of positive images on film, contact me. Let me know. Okay, I'd love to get a hold of one so that I could actually show this in use and display the image on the wall. Okay, that would be kind of cool. But anyway, I think the history here is fantastic of these two items, and I'll end it at that. And as I like to say, get out there and enjoy life, capture some of it, no matter which camera you choose to use. Okay, and I'll end the show by showing a few advertising images for you to get a kick out of that advertise both the camera and the memoscope. And we'll end it there. So take care. We'll see you again next time. Have a good one. Hey everybody, if you enjoyed this video, hey, give me a thumbs up. Leave a comment. Always nice to hear from you folks. And if you haven't subscribed, consider it. I would appreciate it if you would. But get out there and shoot and have a good time. Take care. Till the next Thanks for the Memories edition.